Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Mérida. I'm one of the national co-chairs of the Green Party of the United States. Everyone. And I will turn down my volume. And I'm really excited because we're talking to you live from Denver, Colorado. And I have with me here today my friend Julie Bañuelos. I should mention that she and I are actually also fellow co-chairs of the Denver Green Party. But Julie's stepping out on a ledge. Julie is, just to give you an indication of what ledge she's stepping out on, she has decided to run for school board here in Denver, which is a very monumental kind of an endeavor, just like running in any town. But Julie's going to be facing some stakes, some high stakes, and it's a really courageous thing that she's decided to do. So Julie, hi, welcome. And, we've got all these folks in Green Party land looking at you and want to hear what you have to say. Tell us a little bit about yourself, some biographical information. Who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing?
Okay. So hello to everybody that's watching. My understanding is this is being televised nationally. So what a wonderful opportunity to do that today here from my house. But a little bit about me is I am a former elementary school teacher. I spent 15 years in Denver Public Schools. I actually grew up here in Denver and attended Ebert Elementary, which was across the street from where I spent most of my early years. Across in the public housing that was there. So we actually were living there because my father was getting his degree from Metropolitan State College at the time for electrical engineering. And so, we were part of the community, had roots there, and I was very attached and very happy with the support that I got from not only my parents, but the teachers that really had a long careers at Ebert. Thereafter, I lived a couple of places, and I actually went to college in Iowa. I went to Grinnell College, and I majored in economics and had a concentration in Latin American studies. But the reason I bring that up is that I didn't go down the traditional path of becoming a teacher. It just happened to be that while I was employed at an investment firm in downtown Denver, I was very close to Ebert. And so I decided to become a reading buddy, a reading volunteer. And that's really when my desire to become a teacher just surfaced up, that I had a lot of passion for that relationship with students. And so I just I did a 180 in terms of career. And so I became a paraprofessional after that for a year. And then, excuse me.
It's allergy season here in Denver.
It is, and I suffer from those. But so then I worked on my teaching certificate through an alternative teaching program, teacher in residence through Metropolitan State College. I dedicated 2 years through that program, which prepared me very well, I think. But what made the difference was the hands-on experience in the classroom and having great mentors. So that's how I became a teacher. And I started off at Ebert Elementary as an ESL, as a para, and then an ESL teacher. And I wanted to spend the rest of my teaching career there because I had that big connection with the students that looked like me and had that experience that I'd gone through, right? And I hope to be visible to them as somebody who's capable of achieving not only an education, but getting out of what would be low income situation.
Yeah, you and I have very similar backgrounds. We're both daughters of immigrants.
Yep.
And we both come from working class backgrounds as well. And one of the things that we've seen is in public education is that folks who don't necessarily have the background that we do are there making policy decisions about us, people like us, right? So what is your family background? You
oh yes. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you grew up. You had the ability to work hard yourself when you were a kid. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So I was fortunate enough. My father's family, they were migrant workers. So they traveled to California, to Texas, to Colorado, to Nebraska, to Wyoming. And so it just happened to be that my parents married young. My mother is a Mexican immigrant. She got her citizenship when I was little. But it happened to be that my father didn't want to continue that path as being a migrant worker.
You worked in the fields
hard.
Yourself,
right?
Right.
That's just hard work.
Yeah.
Right. And in Colorado, as many might know, has cantaloupes and watermelons, and so in Rocky Ford, Manzanola, and that's the last time that we spent as a unit. With the larger family, and my dad decided to attend Otero and then go to CU Boulder. CU Boulder was too big for the attention he needed as an electrical engineering student. So we ended up in Denver. But growing up, when I was in junior high, middle school age, my dad decided that I needed to go work in the fields. So I spent 3 summers in the hot sun in New Mexico, our chili capital of the world, I think, right? And they recently had their chili festival. But I tilled the ground with a hoe, or the chili, getting rid of the weeds. But I also picked chili, and I picked onions, and often after working for that summer, I would get home and my hands would still smell like onions, but I at least had some money, which contributed to, buying clothes or whatever I wanted during that time. Or as a teenager, well, I don't want to say as a teenager, as a preteen, that felt pretty empowering. And for me, the experience of working in the fields, I think, is what really contributed to that work ethic. I think now, having gotten my Montessori training, there are sensitive periods. There are times in kids' life where they will develop certain skills. And so working in the fields really developed that work ethic. So I was able to transfer that in wherever I went. I worked in high school. I worked while I attended college. I've had 2 jobs at times. So yeah, working hard is just in my DNA.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we have to make sure that the playing field is level, right?
Yes. So in terms of the experience, right, that I have, and I share that. Not so much maybe the migrant aspect. There are not very many migrant workers here in DPS and Denver Public Schools, but the dream to have a better life, to have access to the possibilities of whether pulling yourself out of poverty, having just a better circumstance, that I identified a lot with the kids here in DPS. And DPS has about 70% students of color, which is significant and really makes a difference when it speaks to the need that we have as a school district to really make efforts in hiring teachers of color. And it's not doing that. Right. It's not. And so how are we giving our students the belief that there's an opportunity to get out?
Well,
or make their life better, pursue their dreams.
Yeah. So that really matters. And I mean, you've said often that you're actually very proud of the fact that you're not a politician, right?
Right.
So why are you running?
Well, I'm running simply because having spent that amount of time in DPS, I observed pre-reform or pre-privatization when I first started teaching. And then as I completed my career, which was just a year ago in October, I just observed so many injustices that really hurt my soul personally. Our students, our English learners were not being served according to the consent decree, which is a federally court-ordered law.
Right.
And then our teachers, our experienced teachers, especially the ones that work 65, 80 hours during the week, were being pushed out because they're expensive or because they talked too much or they knew so much and they were a threat to administrators. So, and right now the direction of privatization here in Denver is only hurting them more and more, that soon we will be without a public education as we know it, where we have access to resources that have been that come from money, that taxes that our Denver citizens have approved. Right. So I got tired, but I left last year, and I just left because I felt, and I've said this before, vulnerable and not protected, that I too would have become a casualty. And I work as a family service worker now, and I intentionally wanted to get into work that would support our students, because that wasn't happening, especially our students living in our working class students, our immigrant community. So I have the privilege to still do the type of work that teachers often were able to do before. Mm-hmm. And I do that as a family service worker now.
You're still on duty.
And that was I still am on duty, correct. I still wanted to do a lot for my community. But, I mean, this conversation came up about running, and quite frankly, I think we need a teacher who reflects that majority population and really has experienced the injustices to be able to understand how policy is made. Because right now, all those folks that sit on our board don't have a clue how policy is affecting our most vulnerable, our most marginalized. And that is because they don't share the background with our kids.
That's absolutely
true. And
true.
so I could have sat back enjoying, and I do enjoy working for Catholic Charities, but my sister Paula is a teacher as well. Watching her, and she's a hard worker, she's getting her doctorate, and watching her go through and hearing friends as well, because you have a crew of teachers. Once you're a teacher, you have friends. I got tired of watching them suffer and hearing these horrible stories about how they've been pushed out. And I could either sit back or I could do something about it. And I decided to be courageous and really do something that I had no experience doing, and really bring that knowledge that I have to the forefront, and that to guide me during this process.
Right. I mean, we've seen, former members of the school board who, they get into it because it's a stepping stool, because, there's always the accusation that school board is the way to launch yourself to a bigger political career.
Right.
We see here in Denver, here locally, well, you're running for at-large, which is
Yes.
the citywide race. Mm-hmm. We've seen other candidates that have been able to raise from corporate interests $250,000 or more, right?
Not the kind of money that I have, and I will probably not earn that in my lifetime, or it will take till I'm 65, 80 maybe.
Well, but you bring another value to this race, right?
And I hope people can appreciate that, and that the most hurt right now are families and our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our recently graduated kids can get involved at this local level, right? Because nationally, we are where we're at because we failed to act, right? Or we discounted discounted our vote, said, "Oh, my vote doesn't matter," and it does, especially at the local level.
Right, absolutely. And you've said, and you have an extremely progressive platform, and so you've said that there are 3 issues in particular that you wanted to deal with. And first of all was the union busting, basically, that's going on with teachers.
Right.
You've said some pretty strong things about school of choice, right? And then you've actually talked about manufactured segregation, and so I wondered if you could give us a little bit more insight. What do you mean by union busting? What's actually going on in Denver?
Okay, so under this pro-privatization, or as I know it, education reform, the idea of union busting will give more power to the administration, because those bad teachers prevent from these great things from happening. So we've seen a large number of our teachers of color who are most impacted by this attrition, by having to leave, and that says a lot, right, about where, in terms of culturally competent leaders in the district from admin, that's not happening. But our teachers of color become casualties. So that's a way, when you talk about the ones that are most hurt, and who identify with the kids, those teachers need to stay, but they're not staying, and that's indicative. So the ones that would speak out as a result, instead of going with the status quo.
Has high stakes testing had an effect on that?
Oh yeah, no, our teacher evaluation system has had a lot to do with those issues, and it was, anyway. I don't want to go too far from what you asked me. So in terms of union busting, the union contract is being weakened through innovation, the process of innovation schools or innovation models.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. Innovation schools, and we all know that the word innovation sounds wonderful, gives you a lot of creativity. So they kind of grab you with that buy-in, that innovation sounds like there's been this great idea that no one's thought of. But in reality, what's happening is that innovation schools are given more autonomy at the school admin level.
That doesn't sound like such a bad thing.
Right. But they do it with the idea that the principal will get this great curriculum, that they won't have to follow the union contract in order to get to this model that they have suddenly just considered as a bright idea, right? But in reality, what it does is that it gives the principal autonomy when it comes to hiring, and they're hiring teachers that are not experienced, that maybe have 6 weeks of training and don't stay, and getting rid of our experienced teachers who went the traditional path, and some like me who did a in residence, and they push them out because they're cheaper, and often they come from out of state. They're not local. They don't represent
Teach for America.
Teach for America is definitely one that is it's known, and everyone across the country knows. But we also have the Relay program, but that's a whole different issue. But look up Relay, because that's also a way to get more educators that are not trained.
Right.
And I think all our parents would like to have well-trained, experienced teachers, just like you would like a well-trained, experienced plumber, a well-trained, experienced welder, a brain surgeon. You want teachers with experience who still have the passion for our kids and who identify with them. But
so what happens? What happens in an innovation school? What happens to a teacher who's a union teacher, a union member?
Okay, so, and I should mention that because there is this aspect of innovation schools that basically waives most of the contract, the union contract articles, there is flexibility to evaluate our teachers a certain way, to determine if a teacher is effective, even though there's an evaluation system, they get to get away with a little bit more punitive, or not even punitive methods of kind of getting around, and suddenly you're pushed out or you're not good for the team or some sort of excuse, and that's accepted. Due process, and that's a result of waiving the contract, because the contract is there to provide teachers an opportunity, educators, special service providers as well, an opportunity to state their case if there are grievances, either from the staff or the admin, or grievances from a parent. It gives you that right. I think everyone's entitled to due process.
Right. I mean, so essentially, teachers, when they go into these innovation schools or even the charter schools, they're basically waiving some basic constitutional rights.
Right. And under the premise that they know better, because they have this great model that they're going to implement, and they have these great hiring strategies that by going around the contract will allow them to get there faster.
Right. So union busing, you said, these innovation schools, the way that, maybe the impact of high stakes testing. What were you going to say?
The other part of it is, in reality, the innovation schools that have come out of this through this privatization of this pro ed reform have actually used curriculum that is similar to non-innovation schools.
Well, the same,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but yet they do it. But it's supposed to be different because of their innovation status. And that's what we're realizing. And most of these, I need to look at the school map, but charters for sure are popping up, and these opportunities for innovation are popping up in predominantly Black, brown, working class communities. And that is the problem. What that has led to is manufactured segregation. And that isn't helping anybody, because I think the progressive families want diversity, want to be able to take their kids to schools that offer this sort of opportunity to socialize with kids with diverse backgrounds, and what they bring, seeing them as assets.
Yeah, what we've seen is proliferation of charters here, that it's not bubbling up from the community sort of things. It's really just there's one real model that gets approved for charters here in Denver. What would you say about that? Describe the model that gets approved in Denver.
Well, we have about, and I'm rounding around, I think 170 schools, public schools total here in DPS, and we have, as recently as May, become 50% charter. And that tells you simply the direction. We're not lying. We're not making things up. These schools that pop up in terms of charter are almost what I like to say muck charter. They're the same school or I should say the beginning. So we have Denver Schools Denver School of Science and Technology. So we'll have a school that's been closed, because I don't know if everyone knows that DPS has closed or co-located schools. And what goes in there is the DSST at Cole. That Cole used to be a middle school, a junior high, but now it's DSST at Cole.
Kind of as a way to placate the community.
Correct.
Right?
DSST at Montbello. DSST at another school that is now gone. Right. And the way they started is that they sold the model to our brown, Black, working class communities under the guise that their children would go to college. Well, they've been successful at having our kids become great test takers. And yes, they've had the opportunity to attend college, but it's done at the expense of not having a comprehensive high school experience.
But
But
You went to college.
right.
You had to fill out a college application.
Mm-hmm.
Did they ask you for your standardized test when you were in school, other than the SAT or the ACT?
No, and I'm not a test taker. I was terrible. I have to say that what had a lot of weight were the activities that I was engaged in. I played soccer all through my 4 years in high school. I played other basketball. I was part of the school cabinet and part of school government. I participated in MESA, math, engineering, science,
Yeah.
and all kinds of other activities that really helped me become more well-rounded. And that made the difference when it came to my actual college visit and talking.
So you had those opportunities.
I did.
And the charter schools that we have here in Denver?
And the charters now, it's funny because I think they have heard enough complaints that now you will find on their webpage great marketing in terms of reaching out and how they're going to do this for our kids and how they're going to do that, and that they have they're focusing on creating great citizens or whatever language they're using, when we all know here in Denver what's happened is that those models have been very authoritative, very punitive. So we talk about dismantling the prison.
Focused on the test.
Focused on the test. So we talk about dismantling the prison to pipeline problem. That being punitive and forcing our kids to behave a certain way and not be themselves clearly makes them sort of lose that light of being who they are. Mm-hmm. And so you will get a different sort of a different narrative now, because I think we've all complained enough. I've heard people say, oh, charter schools don't cherry pick their students. No, they have had a long history that they have done that, that they sell the school or the model to the parent. Come October count, that child that they couldn't serve due to behavior issues, due to the needs that they couldn't provide academically, or in this case with English learners, that they couldn't provide a robust system to really follow, and they didn't follow the consent decree. Then they push them out and they keep the money, right?
So an October count is the law in Colorado that says on or about October 1st, we're going to release funding to your district based on how many kids you have sitting in the seats.
Right.
And so essentially, you're saying that they're kicking the kids out after the October count day.
Right.
So what happens to that funding?
That funding stays with that school.
So it doesn't go to the school? It doesn't follow the kid?
It doesn't follow the kid, and that hurts, of course. Not just the student that was kicked out and has to adjust to a different school climate, a different culture. The school, the other school, and the receiving school suffers, because then the resources are not all there to provide. Right, they provide enough support for them. So those are little details that our families should look into a little bit more, and really dig deep and ask ask these questions that make some folks uncomfortable. And you're going to be asked there's so much going on, right? And make sure you watch the narrative. I mean, I was at a forum yesterday, and I really loved that this particular group of parents held the superintendent and the district representative accountable by asking those direct, uncomfortable questions that needed to be asked. And for me, I got to tell you, I had a headache right here listening to him saying, trying to spin the story still.
He's got good PR training.
He sure does. But, and if you go to the DPS website, you're going to see a beautiful thing. And that's one thing I applaud them. They've done a great job at really revamping that website. But be careful with the bells and whistles. Talk to families. Talk to families when it comes to how there's been a disservice.
Right.
Especially in their charter schools.
Right. So Denver is about 70% low-income students. It's about, it's approaching, well, it was 80% minority. So that's Black, Latino, Native American, Asian. And then what's interesting is that Denver is about 50% English learner. And so I've heard you talk about the consent decree. what is the quick and dirty description of what the consent decree is?
Okay, so the consent decree was a court order that they came up in 1984 because a majority of our Spanish speakers were being discriminated. So on the federal level, they decided that basically there had to be this document outlining the expectation or the requirements, not expectation, the requirements for districts to serve our, in this case, English learners.
So it's a federal court order. Mm-hmm. The ruling was against the Denver Public Schools.
Okay. Now, it was 1984. We are in 2017. I don't want to do the math there, but it's been a long time. As of 2010, even they weren't doing it. So and I think you were part of holding them accountable.
Yeah.
and they still haven't done a good job. I think the plaintiffs, right? The plaintiffs still aren't getting what they fought for.
So and this consent decree calls for what specifically is supposed to happen within this consent decree?
It calls for everything from the particular school models that they make available to the families of English learners. They talk
to help English learners transition over to
English
academic fluency.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh. And that's going to take time, right? We talk about how teachers have to be trained and it's thorough training to be able to reach these students, because it's just not anybody that can come in and teach these kids. Mm-hmm. You have to really be committed to the strategies and understand them. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then another component of that is the aspect of collaborating and working with our parents and communicating the details, not just of the requirements, but also how we reach out to them, how we do the outreach. And
the pedagogy,
exactly.
Yeah. What's actually happening to your kid in the classroom?
Exactly, yeah. and even communication where it should be available in all the languages that are spoken here in DPS, and there's a huge number of all the languages. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I don't want to bore you. But for example, there's something that's called Transitional Native Language Instruction. We call it, for short, the acronym is TNLE. In a TNLE model, and there's 3 models, right? There's the TNLE model requires that the school, if it's designated TNLE, that they provide Spanish-speaking instructors for classrooms, because the philosophy is if a child has a strong native language, they're going to transfer those skills in due time into English. Well, so often through this reform here in Denver Public Schools, that is not being done with fidelity. And then you wonder, when it comes to testing in English, why our students aren't doing well. And it gives the district another reason to close our schools.
So we have school ratings here in Denver.
Right.
It's called the School Performance Framework.
Right.
And really, people on the reform side tend to say, oh, well, this is great. They even aside color coding to it. And, if you're a parent, you want to look for the blue schools or the green schools.
Yeah.
But it's predominantly based on the standardized test, right? Mm-hmm. In Colorado, by law, up to a certain point, you can have Spanish language tests. And then also by law, everyone that's designated as an English learner has to take an English proficiency exam. Mm-hmm. So what's the problem? Why? Tell me what you think is going on.
So if we go back to my comment of where the charters and the innovation schools are popping up, they're more in our Black, brown, and working class communities. And what I can tell is that there's issues with those standardized tests, the way that they're being used to evaluate schools.
Does SPF, does it take into account any of the Spanish language preparation, the school performance program?
No, it does not consider, because we as teachers, and teachers would know, right? That a child needs to have enough exposure and consistency with regards to language instruction. And it has to be at least for 3 years, because you have to evaluate. There's a committee in the school that has to evaluate the progress along with the input of teachers and the input from parents, evaluate the progress of the students' language acquisition, and establish supports if they're needed. But what's happening is other factors too, is that the tests have changed here in Colorado. But what's happening is our students are asked to take the test, in this case the state test, and they've reached that point where they're not allowed to take it in Spanish anymore, or they've been assigned that they're designated to take it in English. Well, a student isn't going to adjust within a year to taking a test in English. You need to be able to do a release, or at least consider what is going wrong. What do we need? What can we do better? Or at least take into consideration how they've grown from baseline language skills, and just include that as an evaluation of language skills. I mean, our truly bilingual students end up performing way better than our monolingual English if they've received a robust language instruction. And who doesn't want to be able to have bilingual children who do great on standardized testing? Yeah,
and I think best practices as regards English learners, it takes something like 8 years, really, if you want to do it well, to bring kids to full English fluency, without destroying their native language, because that's the concept that the English Learner Program here in Denver uses. Is that you don't run away from the native language, the mother tongue.
Yeah, you have to use it as an asset and use it to help both languages.
Right.
So when you redesignate children that they're proficient in English, they've essentially pushed away that second language if they don't have enough cultural support at school.
Right.
They end up sort of disconnecting from that, from what was the original power, or the original power from home. So we have to honor that as well.
And it's not just a question of honoring; it's actually the way the brain is wired. And so it seems to me that it's a kind of a civil rights injustice, to not. Education is a human right.
Right, and that's where we've gotten to that point where we have to say it's the right of everyone to have access to education that's quality, as determined by educators, not politicians and policymakers
that's based in science.
Yes, pedagogy.
And research. And so it's really an injustice when a student doesn't have access to good language development skills. And really all students are language learners, right?
And we should also consider those passionate teachers that really dedicate to professional development, who really are committed to their communities, who have continued to build on their knowledge of instructing English learners. Those are the teachers you want. Well, we have
in a district that's half of the students that are English learners.
You would think, right? So the problem with the 6 week training is that it does not require the extensive experience in teaching English learners. And most of our 6 week trained teachers are put in those schools that are high need, at risk students. So why is it that they're putting them there? Why? Sound almost conspiracy like, but that's not where I'm going.
To say, but definitely, I mean, it really does set up a situation in which, this is why the district is under a federal court order, because it sets up this is a civil rights issue.
Yeah.
And we talk about, racism in our country. We're seeing people talking about pulling down statues, and those are really dramatic things. And, we need to make sure that we're people of justice, and that we're standing for civil rights. But then there's this kind of stuff that happens that it's probably not as sexy, but it's, it's affecting, DPS is what, 80,000 kids,
Yeah.
50% English learners. We're talking about 40,000 kids a year that just come out of Denver schools. And so, let's tear down all of the statues of Robert E. Lee and stuff like that, but let's also pay attention to this sort of thing.
Right. The local level, I mean, the disparity too in the number of teachers of color, wow. It's the opposite. Yeah. So you have 70% students of color, and then you have 70% white educators.
Right. And so
who are not from here mainly.
And what's interesting too is that, we said earlier that, all kids really are English learners, and what seems apparent to me, just kind of watching you talk about this and sort of thing, that all of the best practices for education are contained within this consent decree and this court order, which actually can apply to other populations as well. This calls for a managed class size. You can't, and a teacher qualification. The parents have to be involved.
Right.
The parents have to choose the level of English instruction or whatever. So, all of these things, of parent engagement, of making sure that you have well-trained teachers, and so making sure that your class sizes don't get too big. I mean, we've seen throughout education policy that those are the things that work. Yeah,
and I hate to bring us back to the 60s, but since we're kind of talking about statues and civil rights, the civil rights movement in a sense, the new civil rights movement.
Right.
When you
or maybe
hear,
it's the same one.
Maybe, because we really, right, exactly. When we consider that we still hear from educators, administrators, that they're not allowed to speak Spanish,
no me diga.
That blows me away.
Today?
And not today, but in DPS. I mean, what? Yeah, right. And I hate to, but that's what's happening. That's why we have to start paying attention. You may have kids. Some of you may have kids. Some of you may not. Support teachers. Go ask if you. And I think you so many things. Go support them. They're not funded at the level that they should be funded. Volunteers are needed, but also, if we, and that maybe this would be another subject to talk about too, but if our parents who have grievances about our teachers, if they actually went to talk to our teachers with good intentions about maybe some issues they have to improve on, then we wouldn't have so much stress, so many stressed teachers, and teaching wouldn't be such a horrible career now, because that's the level it's gotten.
Well, the shot caller is the family, is the parent.
Yeah.
They have a lot of power.
Right. So if we were able to collaborate and work with our teachers when a misunderstanding has happened, we wouldn't have the administrators involved in pushing teachers out. So our families can do a lot of good with that, and also be examples in terms of restorative justice when it comes to if has been hurt or a misunderstanding, really being examples to their children on how to resolve conflict in a healthy way.
Right. Absolutely. Well, this has been a really, really good conversation, and I mean, we've got a lot of other things that we need to talk about. Maybe at a future date we can do that. So people around the country, Greens around the country who are really into public education or even into the civil rights aspect of public education, where are they going to find you?
So my website is www.julie, Julie, DPS, that's dog, people, sweater.com. So www.juliedps.com.
Great. And so how can people help your campaign, though?
You're ahead of me. Yeah, I was going to say, because there's a little spiel, right? Clearly, I am a grassroots candidate. We are doing our best to try and ask friends, family, supporters of public education, anti-privatizers, to help us out with money. So when you go to my website, you're going to find the button for volunteers. and for donating. And it would really help me out, because it's a David and Goliath when it comes to the money aspect of this race. I am not going to have friends who are going to bring in $250,000 to fight against what's happening here in Denver.
So donate.
Do it, help us out. There's less than 6 weeks, I believe.
Right.
Less than 6 weeks, maybe.
So how can people volunteer remotely, though?
Oh, good question. Now in the technology, right? We live in a great time to be able to. Well, I think one of the things you can do is phone bank.
Right. And there's a link on your website.
And a link on my website. Don't forget to like the Facebook page.
And share it.
So go ahead and sign up when we have events, particularly the phone banking. Sign up, talk to voters, let them know.
And it doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. You can actually
do it on your own.
Yeah.
We have a YouTube video. Once you sign up, I think it guides you. You go to it and it tells you how to do it. And it gives you even a script. So that's not hard.
Yeah.
And if it's real people who are doing it because of their passion and they have the same values that I should say, support the values that I'm bringing to the table, you're doing it for free. And a lot of my opponents that are part of the ed reform, they're paying canvassers, they're paying phone bankers, and I'm relying on support from regular people.
Volunteer hours. Okay. Well, great. So this has been a really good conversation. I hope people have gotten an idea of the kinds of things that you're standing for. You can volunteer for Julie's website and visit her website at juliedps.com. Or you can get to her Facebook page that way. You can get to her Twitter page that way. Definitely, even if you have only $5 to donate, even just a little bit can help.
Right.
It's really, really important that we make a good play, make a good stand against privatization here in Denver. Denver has been a place where many school districts around the country have modeled their own. I know Philadelphia has had some exposure to Denver tactics, and very much along the same vein of Chicago and LA. And so if we make a stand in Denver, we can say no to privatization. And you had a last thought?
Yeah. Even if you're in a different state, pay attention to ALEC, the organization that Betsy DeVos,
American Legislative Exchange Council. Yes.
Yeah, they're having a lot of impact on state policy. I mean, clearly this is why we have choice and why we have all these big dollars coming into Denver. Right. Don't believe the hype in terms of choice is working and this mixture, this portfolio management of schools. No. Talk to the
This is a free market concepts. Why are we talking about that? But anyway, visit Julie's website at juliedps.com. And figure out there's a couple of ways at least there to help, regardless of where you are in the country. Julie, thank you very much. Thank you for running. You're not a politician, but you're a teacher and you're still on duty. So thank you for looking out for the community.
Thank you, and appreciate that people tuned in. I don't know how many did, but hopefully many.
Droves.
Droves. Oh, that's good. But thanks so much. Hopefully everyone can enjoy the rest of your night if you're in the U.S.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.